Yeah, I guess we can go ahead and get started. And as people come in, they can just catch up with us. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. My name is Casey Green. I am the Outreach and Communications Coordinator with VAEE. We also have Ashley Palmer here. She's going to be monitoring our chats and helping out with any questions you guys might have. I'm really excited for this. I hope you guys are too. Um, yeah, so this is our agenda. We're going to take about 5 minutes for welcome and introductions. Then we'll jump right into our Creating Climate Stewards. And we will have time for Q&A and discussion at the end. And then we have some wrap up and resources following that. As a participation tip, please stay muted for best sound unless you're speaking. And you can use the chat box to ask questions or engage. A few things for VAEE. We have our VAEE board meeting coming up on June 2nd. Then on June 12th, that's our next installment of these sessions. So that's going to be enhancing the outcomes of K-12 environmental education with Angela Whitaker. We also have our next certification enrollment opening on August 4th. And if you'd like to become a member, we have that link there. And without further ado, I'd like you to meet our presenter, Crystal DiMiceli. She's an environmental educator, podcast producer, and host for Forces of Nature and the Healthy Seas podcast. She has 20 years of experience in environmental education, sustainability, and conservation. She's also dedicated to helping people answer the question, but what could I possibly do to make a difference in the environment? Love that. She does that through her podcasts and her educational program for schools and businesses. Prior to that, she worked with the Wildlife Conservation Society, National Geographic, and the Smithsonian Institute. So welcome, Crystal. I'm going to go ahead and unshare and let you share, and we'll get started.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I'm just gonna minimize the screen with all our guests, and so if you're raising your hand or you have a question, just unmute yourself and let me know because I might not see it, or place it in the chat and we can get to it at the end. But thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm really excited to talk to you today on how we can activate student involvement in tackling climate change. And it is not moving. Hold on. Oh, here we go. So you'll leave today's talk knowing what is eco-anxiety and what can we do to help prevent it or curb it in our kids, that hope, optimism, and inspiration can be more effective catalysts for climate action, and what actions can individuals take that can truly move the needle. But before I go too much further, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a born and raised New Yorker, but I now live in Virginia, and I am a lifelong animal lover. Here is a picture of me in the Masai Mara, where I happy cried on multiple occasions. So I saw the giraffes, I cried. I saw the elephants, I cried. I saw the lions, I cried, and gawked, as you can see here, when this guy just sauntered up to our vehicle and plopped down and took a nap. No, we did not hit him with the car. That's what many people ask me. I worked in wildlife conservation for many years, and I thought I wanted to go into ecotourism because I wanted to protect the environment and travel at the same time. But a fellowship in Panama made me realize that wasn't quite what I wanted to do, but a 6-month stay became more long-term, and I started working with the Smithsonian in creating a new environmental education program for them down there. A move to Colombia then had me looking for a way to stay engaged in conservation. But without a work permit to get a traditional job, I needed to get creative. And this was before COVID and work from home times. So that led me to create the podcasts Forces for Nature and the Healthy Seas podcast, the latter excuse me, the latter being for an organization called Healthy Seas. And in each of them, I focus on solutions and success stories. And there's a reason why I do, which is what we're going to go into. More recently, though, I just moved back to the States from Italy, where I created an environmental education program for high schools and university students that focuses on action for climate change. The work we do as environmental educators can sometimes feel like an uphill battle, but we can't get discouraged. Knowledge is power, and we need to empower our kids and adults to be able to tackle the climate crisis head on. But there's something to be said about ignorance is bliss, right? I experienced this firsthand myself not too long ago. How many of you, when you hear about the countless wildfires and the unprecedented storms and the record-breaking heat waves, feel a little bit of anxiety? I never had until a few summers ago. Despite having lived in the tropics for many years, my last few summers in Italy had been the hottest and most uncomfortable ones I ever experienced. They were like just one long, unending heat wave. And it's not supposed to be like that in Rome. I was constantly hearing about the wildfires throughout the country and saw the local river right down the block from me drop to levels where some boats couldn't even pass. There were accounts of crops drying out in the countryside and economies getting hit hard by it. And I remember often carrying this feeling of edginess and wanting to cry for no apparent reason. And I didn't understand exactly why, but I noticed as I paid attention in those moments that my thoughts were going back to what was going on outside, to the homeless who were suffering from the heat and the people without the means to pay for AC and even wildlife. They're all suffering because of the heat. And I realized that I was experiencing what's called eco-anxiety, which is extreme worry about the earth and the life that it supports. And studies are showing that youth are experiencing this feeling greater than any other demographic. It's not moving again. Hold on, there we go. In fact, Swedish psychologist Maria Ohala explains that just talking about climate change has been shown to have detrimental effects on children's mental health. She says that learning about global problems can trigger profound feelings of anxiety, helplessness, and hopelessness, especially for children who are still learning to regulate negative emotions. And these negative emotions can lead to eco-anxiety. I want to help you prevent this before it even happens or ease it if it already has. It's important that we teach our students that this crisis is real, but we have to protect them while we do it and make sure that we don't cause them to disengage and lose hope. With that end in mind, I'm going to talk about two ways that we can do this: messaging and action. For years, the climate movement has been bombarding us with narratives that the world is on fire, inundating us with images of polar bears on shrinking icebergs and hurricanes wiping out entire towns. We've heard countless statistics of temperature rise and CO2 parts per million and all the consequences of it. And it's not that this all isn't true, but we're still not much further along at stopping this train than we were 20 plus years ago. We don't want that same stagnation from our students. So what's happening? There are many factors, but we're going to talk about messaging right now. It turns out that we as humans tend to respond more to emotion than to reason, such as facts. But it's the kind of emotion that you elicit that matters. For example, a study on emotions and self-control had individuals imagining feeling shame from eating chocolate cake or pride if they resisted eating it. 40% of the members in the pride group resisted the cake, while only 10.5% in the shame group. So the feeling of pride proved to be more powerful at eliciting a positive, actionable response. And there's a whole body of knowledge that supports a similar response in different contexts, such as climate change communication. I just chose this example of chocolate cake because who doesn't love chocolate cake? In 2017, I was tasked with bringing a version of the Smithsonian's Earth Optimism Summit down to Panama. Why optimism, though? This was the brainchild of Dr. Nancy Knowlton, a renowned marine biologist who, in her own words, got tired of always writing what seemed to be like the ocean's obituary. She instead started to talk about success stories in conservation, highlighting the good news happening on her social media, at events, in her writings, and the response surprised her. She saw students, instead of leaving class despondent, leaving with enthusiasm. People were approaching her at conferences, thanking her for not focusing exclusively on the doom and gloom. And the Smithsonian transformed it into an entire initiative with a global event focused on optimism for the Earth. By the way, throughout the presentation, you'll see these images with the green frame around them. These are actual individuals that I interviewed on Forces for Nature, and I think you'd find them just as inspiring as I have. So I'm just gonna zoom back out real quick. I wanna make sure everybody's hearing me okay? Okay, great. So it turns out there's scientific reasoning for what Dr. Knowlton experienced. This is just a sampler of the many papers that have explored how positive narratives and optimism can be effective vehicles for motivating action. So let's explore that. Take a look at these three images. One is a graph of Australia's surface air temperature for the past century. Another is a devastating image of one of the koala casualties from their terrible bushfires they experienced in 2019 and 2020. And the last is of a koala being rescued. Take a sec and think about how each of them make you feel. I recently found a study that suggests that statistics of species decline. Now, I know this is air temperature, but stay with me. Stats of species decline evoke empathy from conservationists, but less so from the general public. Same goes for stats like this. The general public more likely feels confused, detached, overwhelmed. I showed this graph recently to a group of friends of mine, and one of them neatly summarized their reaction with a simple, nope. And how do you feel with this devastating picture in the middle? I'm willing to bet horrified, sad, hopeless. The more someone experiences media like this, that's super uncomfortable, the more likely they are to become numb to it, tune it out, and avoid it, not take action on it. And this is supported by many of the papers I showed you in the previous slide. Now, messaging is a complex topic, and I can't overgeneralize that negative stories don't inspire action, because in some cases they do, but it hasn't been enough up to this point to make the changes that we need. And so other strategies are required and can arguably be more effective. In my experience, when you tell solutions-oriented stories like Kelly's here, or when you humanize an issue, and when you don't use shame and guilt, you can find a more engaged, energized, and bought-in crowd. So if we respond to emotion, we want to provide our kids with the opportunity to feel optimism, excitement, motivation, inspiration, hope, efficacy. How can we weave this into our lessons? What good stuff can we talk about? This is where you come in. I want to take 5 to 10 minutes for you to think about the local solutions-based stories that you can tell your students. What good things are happening in Virginia or nearby in regards to climate change? What progress is being made? For example, Alison Zach here, she is the founder of the Human Beaver Coexistence Fund here in the Mid-Atlantic. What do beavers have to do with climate change, you may ask? Beaver created wetlands play a role in helping to mitigate certain effects of climate change, such as increasingly frequent severe weather events that result in major floods, droughts, and wildfires. And if you can't think of something from Virginia, expand out. How about the East Coast, the US in general? Let's take a few minutes now and think about some examples, and then we'll discuss it with each other. How's that sound? I will keep watch on the clock and let's say about 5 minutes, okay? And I know that there's a way to play music on Zoom, but I'm not going to mess with that right now. I love that, Tara. These are great examples coming in. We're going to talk about them in just a moment. More minutes? All right. These are really great examples coming into the chat. Does anybody want to hop on and share them with us? You can just unmute yourself. Tara, tell us a little bit about the solar panels on the school and the reclaimed mines.
Okay. Well, first I thought of what was my children's first elementary school here. And they already have gardens and a greenhouse and lovely things, but slowly, we've been seeing the solar work going on. And sure enough, the roof is just entirely covered in solar panels. I don't know if it covers all of their energy needs or not, but that's a lot of roof space. So I'm willing to bet they're doing pretty okay with it. So seeing that just reminded me of there's a lot of really great work being done. And in far southwestern Virginia, the Nature Conservancy has a project where they're working on reclaimed mine lands in the Cumberland forest, and they're preserving the forest that is there as part of their work too. But on the reclaimed mine lands, that's not so easy to necessarily reforest, and it's all the land is they're usually open pit strip mines. So the land is pretty degraded. So it's pretty great to put solar there. And that solar is actually, they're working a lot on having the solar power servers, which we know are a big issue. Where's the power going to come from? And there's an enormous push to build a lot of servers, especially in Virginia, computer servers. So they also are using the cool water that's in the underground passageways under where the mining was done. I don't know all the details, but there's cooler water down there, so they have naturally cooler water to cool the servers as well. So they're working on how this can be done sustainably and how that can help Southwestern Virginia transition away from coal and give them something else that can be an income source for them at the same time. There are tricky parts to it. Anything has details you have to work through, but they're working on it, and there are already servers being cooled by mine lands and powered by solar.
Amazing, amazing. And even if that school is not entirely powered by the solar panels, think of all of those kids and families being exposed to that. And it's normalizing solar panels and clean energy. And we'll talk about that in a moment too. Thank you for sharing.
Tara, what a great sense of pride for those elementary school kids. I think about that. We talk about that. It's like, I'm proud. Look what we're doing, solar panels.
Absolutely, yeah.
Courtney, since you're unmuted, you want to share your story?
Oh, yeah. I love telling great positive stories. So I'm first off a very hopeful, optimistic person, and I'll be the first one to cry at both of those first two images. So I always try to keep it upbeat when I've spent 45 years with kiddos, and you can see their little faces when they're going down. So you have to keep it positive. But our local nonprofit is Clean Valley Council, and we just recently had Clean Valley Day cleanups, which we decided to make the entire month of April. And reports are still coming in, but we've got, upwards of 200 people rallying together to pick up litter and keep it out of the waterways and lessen our impact in greater spaces where we live here locally in Roanoke, Virginia. And we have cleaned up, 2 tons, upwards of 2 tons of litter just with those few volunteers. So I always like to share that because a lot of people, sure, it's sad to see the litter, but a lot of people really care about the earth, so they're doing good things. So the cleanup part's good. That gives all the volunteers a sense of pride. So sharing that with a lot of kids, it makes them happy too when I say, oh, litter, right? You're picking up trash. So positive things like that.
That's fantastic. I loved Roanoke when I went there for the VAE conference. It was such a cool town.
Come back.
I will. I certainly will. Can I call someone else? Ashley? Or you
Sure.
commented. I don't know. Do you also have a story?
I mean, I hope everybody always has stories. I have stories. Um, well, actually, both of those previous stories made me think of similar things. In Fairfax County, where I live, which is like Northern Virginia, very close to DC, one of our parks just built a new nature center. Um, and it's a building that meets the Living Building Challenge. And I think there's only something like 20 something buildings that meet that. Essentially, the building gives back more to the environment than it takes through its production. So all of the wood is like locally sourced. They compost, recycle like everything. They do geothermal. They have passive cooling and heating. They do it all. And it's such a really great spot to bring other folks out to and say, like, look at what we can do. We're actually doing it. So that's a really cool thing to see. And then Courtney talking about people being really interested and engaged in litter cleanup makes me think about I also do work with the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District, and there I'm constantly getting emails from kids about how can I volunteer? What can I do? How can I join what you're doing? And I'm seeing so many young people passionate about this work and wanting to jump in. They're like, I'm going to make my mom drive me all over the county. Just tell me where we need to be. That's just always so inspiring.
That's fantastic. And where's that Living Building Challenge again?
It's the Sully Woodlands Stewardship Center. It's in Chantilly.
Okay, that's fascinating. Very cool. Marianne?
Yes, thank you. So, wonderful stories. Thanks for sharing. So for me, I heard recently that an ancient coal mine site in West Virginia, a place of desolation where there was no more employment. The landscape was deteriorated by the coal mine, and the patrimony of the coal mine was kind of being, lost. But also the social fabric of the area, etc. And actually, they were smart enough to think that would be a good place to use to put a huge solar panel farm and create employment, and they did, and it's a beautiful project because it's rebuilding the social fabric and the jobs and the same idea, energy, but not fossil fuels anymore, just renewables. So I thought it was a really nice story, a nice way to also reclaim a land that was kind of, not used anymore, and to do something positive. So
Thank you. Yeah, I love that.
I had another small story, if I can have another minute. It's Crystal and I, we're involved in a beautiful initiative called the Climate Fresk. And what is a climate fresk? It's kind of a big game, board game with 42 cards where we're taking climate data, serious ones, scientifics from the IPCC, put the graphs together, and we use them and we put them in an order of cause to consequences around a table where participants learn how the climate system works. And we did that with high schoolers, with a whole classroom of maybe 30 kids last week. And for Earth Day, or 2 weeks ago for Earth Day. And, in this environment of political, where we're going out of the Paris Agreement, etc., these kids gave all the grown-ups a lesson of resilience and hope for the future. These high schoolers were so well informed, so smart. They came with great solutions. Emotionally, they were the next moment. They were already into action. They had completely adopted integrated the emotions, the anxiety, they were just totally focused towards the action. It was beautiful. And this is because the teachers are doing such an amazing work teaching them. And that game was made of collective intelligence and smart and inclusive. And it was doing like learning climate science, but in a very engaging manner. And it gave us so much hope to us grown-ups. So at the end of the game, at the end of the 3-hour session, I told them, if the America of tomorrow is is like you guys, I feel so much hope because these kids were great. They understood how grave and urgent it is, and they were already working at it.
Yeah, that was such a good day.
Yeah,
That was a really good day.
Yeah.
And yeah, shameless self-promotion, climate fresque facilitators like Marianne and I go to schools to run these games. So if anybody's curious about that, we could chat about it later. But Heidi, you also put in the chat, so I want to give you a chance to chat to tell us what
Thank you. Yeah, I also feel hopeful. Being involved with conservation efforts and the Virginia Association for Environmental Education, I see more than I have ever seen how much people are doing to help to advance efforts to combat climate change. And it's so hopeful. And I was lucky enough this past weekend to go to the Piney Grove restoration area, which is, I think we met in Waverly. It's somewhere in Sussex, or maybe it's the Nature Conservancy's area where they're trying to restore the longleaf pine, and which will enhance several endangered species. One in particular is the red-cockaded woodpecker. And it was super cool it was a full day of checking out different spots within that 10,000 acre property. And we got to see recent remnants of prescribed burns, where they're trying to restore the area to pre-colonial days, I think. And what happened was there was just a lot of mismanagement, and the details escape me right now. But what happened as a result is that the red-cockaded woodpecker lost its habitat. It nests in the longleaf pine trunks, and it was very interesting to see how they do that. And but I came to learn that they also do that in loblolly, and so that's somehow how they've been able to hang in there. But through these efforts over the years, and I'm not sure what the time frame is, but there were something like only 2 breeding pairs left when they got involved with this project. And now with prescribed burns and selective cutting, there are a whole bunch of them. I think it's very much a success story. So that was really neat, a neat experience.
Beautiful. I wonder, you reminded me of the scarlet macaw in Costa Rica, because they also nest in tree trunks, and their numbers were decimated, and they also had an incredible recovery story. So thank you everybody for sharing. Those were fantastic stories. Nice. There we go. I was going to share with you some other great stories, but you all nailed it. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to skip, and you can see these in the recording if you want to look at them further. But before I do move on, these are the kinds of stories that you want to share with your students. And get them excited. And once you've inspired them with the stories and motivated them to want to be a part of the change, then what do you do? What can we tell them to do that would actually move the needle? And the good news is that we know what the solutions are. They already exist. And the great news is that they don't have to be hard to do. What's hard is changing our habits, right? The program that I created that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk uses behavior change psychology to help students begin to replace their habits with more eco-friendly ones. But I'm not talking about recycling more. We focus on the kinds of actions that have the most bang for your buck, per se, in reducing our personal carbon footprints. And the great thing about taking action that psychologists say is another tool that can help prevent or curb eco-anxiety is to take action. So by being the change that you want to see, your anxiety will ease. And if you could do it within a community of others, it'll ease that much faster. So what actions have the biggest impact? Experts are saying that if people in wealthier, high-consuming countries like the US, like the US, made relatively straightforward tweaks in 6 categories, then we can cut global emissions by 25 to 27%. This accounts for over a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions required, say that 5 times fast, to keep global warming down to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which is what we really want to aim for. Yes, governments and industries are still responsible for most of the actions needed, but individuals are not powerless and are needed to get 100% of the way there. And besides, if we don't push for it, governments and industries won't care for it anyway. And those 6 action categories are eating more plant-based meals. Now, notice I didn't say go vegan. In fact, if you, let's say you eat red meat 5 days a week, if you reduce your red meat intake by just 1 day, by 1/5, if all of us ate red meat 5 days a week and reduced it by 1/5, we would halve deforestation. So eating a more plant-based diet is good for so many reasons. We have reducing food waste, greening our transport, buying less, increasing housing efficiencies, and pushing for systemic change. In the program that I mentioned, I go into detail as to why these are the top action categories and some realistic ways that we can implement it. And if we have time at the end, we can go into it more if you like. But just providing this list of actions is not going to guarantee that anyone's going to do them. Oh, almost definitely not. There are certain things that need to be incorporated to help implement that list. For example, we need to tease out what are the students' barriers to being able to carry out certain actions. These vary for everyone. People have different circumstances and restrictions, abilities, responsibilities, desires, resources, and whatnot. Furthermore, our students may not be in control of certain choices since they're not the adults in the households, and this could lead to them feeling powerless. So we have to discuss with them, what do they have control over? The acknowledgement of barriers and then the discussion on how we might be able to overcome them could be the difference between making some behavior changes or them just throwing their hands up in the air. And just as important as addressing the barriers or the resistance, they may face with certain actions. Sorry. Just as important as addressing the barriers or resistance they may face with certain actions is to address the benefits of those actions besides just the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. There are countless social, economic, and environmental benefits that come with more eco-friendly choices. We want to identify how they personally would benefit from these efforts. And besides just figuring out barriers and benefits, other behavior change tricks include reminders, pledges, Verbal tend to be the most effective, creating connections to existing behaviors, establishing their why, and using the collective to demonstrate that a new social norm is being established, as we touched upon before. And once they have these new habits underway, reminding them of their ability to influence others can empower them. Spheres of influence are the areas where you are, where you touch, where you might be able to have an influence. You find them where you are consumers. What do you buy and from where? What supermarket, what clothing shops, which banks? You vote with your dollar in these places. Where are you a citizen? So who's your superintendent, your mayor, your parish council, your principal? Email them, petition them. Where are you a member? So what organizations or groups are you a part of? Your place of worship, your workplace, clubs, sports teams. What are their eco or climate plans, and how can they green their operations? And who are your peers? Who do you interact with every day? At home, at work, at school, friends, teammates, social media. Start a conversation with them. Boast about your eco choices. In my last episode of season 1 of Forces for Nature, I interviewed Brandon Schauer from the organization RARE. And he said that studies show that the #1 way to get people to change their behavior is just by them seeing their friends doing it. So for example, the greatest predictor of whether I get solar in my home is whether my neighbor has solar. So it's not my demographics. It's not where I live. It's not my political affiliation. So when you make eco choices, tell people about it, share it on social media, shout it from the rooftops. One of the most impactful things you could do to catalyze change is to show others that you're doing it. It's because you're helping to create a new social norm. One of my favorite parts of the program is that I do with students is to have them imagine what a cleaner, healthier, greener, more humane future might look like if we all started taking action to mitigate climate change. Admittedly, when I first learned of this method, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit. But then I did it and I was like, wow, it actually does spark emotion. And what's even more is behavior change psychology says that it is a promising strategy for improving personal involvement in climate change mitigation. The exercise I use is based off the Center for Alternative Technologies postcards from the future. And this activity connects the green actions that they could take to the bigger picture and gives them a sense of purpose and something to work towards. So let me show you an example. Here's this fake social media post made on Canva. Although students can write letters or draw a world in AI or create one with Minecraft or whatever speaks to them. I would normally read through this, and I'm almost done with the presentation, but are we tight for time?
I think you can go ahead and go. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just read through this real quick. Oh my God, 2040 is amazing. Strong demand from the people in the 2020s urged the government to support farmers to transition away from high-till, high-chemical farming methods to regenerative methods. And I now wonder what took us so long. Turns out the improved soil health makes food tastier and more nutritious. My belly issues have disappeared. Farms and backyard gardens also have a steady stream of rich soil available to add to them since everyone either composts their scraps at home or municipalities compost them on a large scale. With no food waste, what I sent to the landfill has been cut in half. In the 2020s, people started making healthier food choices, and it turned out that this was also healthier for the planet. We are all eating less meat, especially red meat, and less dairy products too. Plant-based alternatives are available everywhere, and they are so delicious. This has also helped stop the upward trend that we were seeing in obesity, most notably in children and young people. The livestock that is still kept has improved welfare standards, and the focus is on quality rather than quantity. Land that is no longer needed for the overproduction of food that got wasted anyway has been freed up and is a part of rewilding projects. It's so exciting to see nature and biodiversity come back to these areas. Doesn't it feel different to picture the future this way? To envision how doing your part will contribute to a beautiful whole. And reading these scenarios is great, but it's in the doing of them that experts say create the deepest connections and chance for continued behavior change. And if this is an activity that you might be interested in doing with your students, I will send this to our organizers, and then they can forward it out to you guys with the recording of the presentation. To wrap up, keep in mind that it's key that you strike a balance in your messaging between recognizing the enormous challenges that we're facing and that there is hope. The hope comes from the local solutions-based stories that you share, showing proof that progress is being made, and then empowering your students with the tools to know how they can then be most effectively, be the change that they wish to see. And if I can help in any way, please reach out to me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Crystal. That was really great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to pop those into the chat right now.
Yes.
See my screen that I'm sharing? No, maybe not.
Do I have you?
Oh, there we go. Okay. Perfect. All right, so you guys will get a recording of this. I'm going to send that out hopefully in about a week. You'll get the recording and then that information that Crystal was talking about as well. On the left here, we have a survey we would love for you guys to fill out. Just give us some feedback. Let us know what could have been different, what we could have done more of, whatever you want to talk about. We would love for you guys to fill that out. If you're so inclined, on the right, we have a QR code for making a donation. This is free for everybody, so we would love to keep it that way. There's Crystal's contact information if you have any follow-up questions. And there's my contact information if you have any questions on the virtual learning series. Our next one, as I mentioned, is coming up on June 12th.
Thank you so much. Were there any questions?
Hey, Crystal, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So this is more of a question about the podcast because I'm really interested in podcasting as a platform. I've heard that it's a really great way of getting messaging out. I consume a lot of podcasts. Are there some folks, or like what kind of perspectives do you think are really helpful now? Because, you know, in preparation for this, I looked through and you've spoken with a lot of really insightful, great people. So with your mindset of like this positivity building, you know, what kind of perspectives are you looking for now that you think are going to help carry us through this next stage of climate awareness and action?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what I have found to be powerful was including other perspectives that you might not necessarily agree with. So for example, my last season, I recorded it all at the EarthX conference last year. And EarthX is this fantastic conference that invites people and draws in people from all industries. So you have conservation nonprofits next to fossil fuel companies, next to chemical companies, next to developers and advocates and lobbyists. You have all of these people in one room sharing meals together, going to talks together, and they're not killing each other. And it's because they're all there with the same intention of making sure that the earth is healthy and clean and better for ourselves and for our kids. But we all have different ways of getting there. And that could be contentious for sure. And my intention when I interviewed when I was interviewing people from EarthX was to bring on people. I mean, a lot of people that I'm just normally interested in speaking with, but I also wanted to touch on some topics that I didn't know at the moment if I necessarily agreed with. And so I wanted to give these individuals a chance to tell me about them and give me a chance to learn and see a different perspective that I didn't necessarily consider before. And it was fantastic. I learned so much, and you humanize people. Like we have these large, we're so polarized right now. But when you step back, one, away from your screens, and you step back and you get out there and you start talking to people, you realize that we're not that different, and we really all have very similar values. And like I said, we might have different ways of getting there, but people might have very good reasons for their ways of getting there. So I think that might be a good first step, or a good consideration for a podcast idea if you want to pursue it, because people don't want to be villainized. And if you're able to show different sides and show that you're not trying to villainize one side or the other, I think that would give you a broader reach and a more engaged audience.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Thank you, Marianne, by the way. I see your comment. All right. Anybody else? This was awesome. Thank you so much for letting me speak with you guys tonight. And if there's anything I can do, if there's any way I can help in the future, please just let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal, and thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned, you guys will get the recording of this, and you have our contact information if you need anything else. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Take care.